Why was everyone staring at her like she'd done something unspeakable? Marin didn't move as the clerk's voice echoed through the courtroom, her name hanging there like a question no one wanted answered. She stood at the defendant's table, uniform pressed but stripped of insignia, eyes steady, posture trained, a soldier even now, though they'd spent the last 6 months trying to convince the world she'd never been one. The air was heavy with murmurs, family on one side, the family she'd bled for, written letters to, sent money to, and yet they'd brought her here to prove she was a liar. "Marin Cole," the judge said again, his tone firm but distant. "You are aware your parents and sister have filed suit contesting your veteran benefits and inheritance under the claim that your service record was falsified." "Yes, Your Honor," she said quietly. Her voice didn't waver. She'd faced insurgent fire in Kandahar, seen men she'd trained with buried under dust and silence. Words couldn't scare her, but the sight of her sister Vanessa in the front row, arms crossed, chin lifted in smug certainty, hit harder than any bullet ever could. Vanessa didn't look away, neither did their parents. To them this was justice. Marin's medals, her discharge papers, her benefits, it was all a fraud, they said. She'd never been in Afghanistan. She faked her identity, stolen valor, embarrassed the Cole name. But Marin knew better. The truth didn't always survive the war. She kept her gaze steady, letting the rhythm of her breathing guide her. In, out, like she'd done behind the scope. The same calm that steadied her trigger finger now steadied her heart. The attorney representing her family, a polished man in an expensive navy suit, stood, smiling like someone rehearsing empathy. "Miss Cole," he began, walking slowly toward her, "you claim to have served in the United States Army's Special Operations Command, specifically as a long-range reconnaissance and sniper support operative. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And yet," he said, lifting a folder, "our independent investigation found no trace of a Marin Cole on record. No active duty orders, no deployment logs, no pay stubs. Nothing." He flipped the folder closed like a magician revealing an empty hat. "So I ask again, Miss Cole, were you ever actually deployed to Kandahar?" The courtroom was silent, except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Marin looked at him, really looked, and said, "You're asking the wrong question." A pause, a few heads turned. The attorney frowned. "Excuse me." "You should be asking," she said, voice low, "why those records are missing." The words landed like quiet thunder. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't start with the classified mission nonsense." Marin didn't look at her. She didn't have to. The weight of her sister's contempt was familiar, almost comforting, like a scar she'd stopped noticing. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Miss Cole, are you suggesting your records were expunged for security reasons?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Your Honor. I'm stating a fact." "Do you have proof of this?" Marin hesitated. Proof. That word again. Proof was supposed to mean truth, but in her world it meant paperwork, and the truth didn't always come with signatures. Her attorney, a quiet veteran named Latham, leaned toward her, whispering, "Stick to verifiable details." But what was verifiable about a war most people preferred to forget? She swallowed. "No, Your Honor," she said finally, "but there are people who can." Her father scoffed from the gallery. "Who, exactly? Your invisible commander." The room chuckled softly. Marin closed her eyes for half a second. She learned long ago that silence could speak louder than fury. When she opened them again, her gaze met the judge. "He's not invisible," she said. "He just hasn't spoken yet." The judge nodded slowly, scribbling something in his notes. "We'll come back to that." As the gavel struck for recess, the sound cracked through her chest like a gunshot. Outside the courthouse, the air was dry, the kind that sticks to the back of your throat. Reporters waited by the steps, microphones raised like rifles. "Miss Cole, did you falsify your service records?" Is it true your own family is calling you a fraud? Were you even in Afghanistan? She didn't answer. She just kept walking, boots hitting concrete with military precision, the same rhythm she'd used on patrol. Latham caught up to her. "They're pushing hard," he said. "Your sister's testimony tomorrow could sink you." "I know." "She's got witnesses ready. Former professors, neighbors, people who'll say you weren't even in the country those years." Marin stopped at the base of the courthouse steps. "They're right," she said. Latham froze. "Come again." "I wasn't in the country." He blinked. "Marin." "But I wasn't where they think I was, either." Her voice softened. "Some places aren't on maps, Tom." He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "If we can't prove your deployment, this case is over. They'll strip your benefits, maybe press charges." Marin didn't answer. She looked past him to a group of pigeons scattering across the courthouse lawn, free and aimless. She almost envied them. When she spoke again, it was almost to herself. "I didn't fight for medals, Tom. I fought for faces I can't even name now." That night she drove out of town, the road lit only by the faint glow of the dashboard in memory. Her old truck still smelled faintly of gun, oil, and leather, like every base she'd ever lived on. She didn't turn on music, just the hum of tires and thoughts. When she reached the outskirts, fields giving way to forest, she stopped, got out. The stars above were sharp and endless, cold and alive. She tilted her head back, letting the silence press against her ears. Kandahar didn't have stars like this. Too much smoke, too much dust. She closed her eyes and she was back there, kneeling on a rooftop, rifle steady against her shoulder, the desert wind dry against her lips. Below, the city pulsed with faint movement, the kind that made your pulse sink with danger. "Cole," a voice had said through her earpiece. "Wind 2 knots west, you got eyes." "Eyes on." "Target confirmed, green light." But she'd hesitated. The target wasn't holding a rifle. It was a boy barely 16 carrying a satchel. Command said he was wired. Intel said he was. She remembered the tremor in her finger, the breath she'd held for too long. The moment where one heartbeat decided everything. Then the explosion. And silence. When she opened her eyes again, the forest was still. Only the sound of crickets filled the air. She whispered to no one, "You can erase files, not ghosts." The next morning the courthouse was colder, more crowded. The air buzzed with curiosity. Her family sat together, perfectly composed. Her mother in pearls, her father in control, Vanessa in smug triumph. The attorney called the first witness, Vanessa Cole. She strutted to the stand, every step rehearsed. "Marin has always had a complicated relationship with truth," she began. "She's dramatic, always has been. After college, she disappeared for years. Then one day she comes back with a uniform and a story about Kandahar. But when we tried to verify, nothing, not even a mention in the database." Her voice cracked just enough to sound sincere. "She used our grandfather's death to get sympathy, and now she's using it to claim benefits she doesn't deserve." The courtroom murmured. Marin didn't look at her. She looked at the floor, where sunlight fell in thin bars through the blinds, bars that looked a lot like prison. Then the judge turned to her. "Miss Cole, do you wish to respond?" She stood. "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom went quiet. "I disappeared for years because I was deployed. My records aren't public because my unit didn't officially exist, but I served. And the only proof I have left," she paused, swallowing, "isn't paper." Vanessa laughed under her breath. "Then what is it, Marin? A feeling?" Marin looked at her sister, really looked. "A scar," she said softly. The attorney smirked. "Objection irrelevant." The judge shook his head. "Overruled. Continue, Miss Cole." Marin stepped forward slowly, voice steady but low. "You want proof? Fine." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a long, jagged mark running from wrist to elbow. "Kandahar, 2012. Convoy ambush. We pulled 2 wounded men out before the second blast. One of them didn't make it, the other did. She turned toward the judge. You did, sir. The courtroom froze. The judge's pen fell from his hand. His eyes, calm, detached until now, widened in disbelief. Marin continued quietly. I didn't recognize you at first. It was dark. You were unconscious when I dragged you behind the truck, but I remember your badge, the one on your vest. I memorized it. Couldn't forget it if I tried. The room erupted in whispers. The judge leaned back slowly, his face pale, searching her eyes for a lie and finding none. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a tremor in his voice, Corporal Cole. She nodded once. He exhaled, the sound breaking like something deep inside had just been released. Court is adjourned, he said suddenly, voice firm but raw. Everyone out, now. The gavel struck again, sharp and final. And in the stunned silence that followed, Marin didn't feel vindicated. She just felt tired. Because even when the truth finally spoke, it still sounded like a confession. The room emptied like a wave pulling back from shore. Voices fell to murmurs, footsteps echoed, and the heavy courtroom doors closed with a dull finality that left only silence. Marin stood still, her pulse loud in her ears. The judge hadn't looked at her again since that moment, since her words had turned the air electric. Corporal Cole, he'd said. The name hadn't left his lips in years. Not since the day she'd pulled him bleeding through the sand, his leg torn open, his radio dead. Now he stood. His robe moved like a shadow as he stepped down from the bench. Everyone out, he repeated, quieter this time, but it carried the same authority. The last of the bailiffs shut the door behind them. For the first time since the war, it was just the two of them. He didn't speak right away, just walked to the window, staring at the morning light streaking across the glass. His voice came low, uneven. You shouldn't be here, Cole. She almost smiled. That makes 2 of us, sir. He turned then, and the years between them vanished. The lines on his face were deeper now, but the eyes were the same, sharp, haunted, human. You saved my life, he said simply. I did my job, she answered. He shook his head. You did more than that. You stayed behind after the convoy was hit. Everyone else was ordered to fall back, but you disobeyed. You dragged me half a mile through burning sand. They told me you never made it out. She said nothing. He studied her, jaw tightening. How did your record disappear? She exhaled. They sealed it. Operation Glasslight. We were ghosts before we ever went in. Covert support to a NATO recon task force. Intel went sideways, the mission collapsed, and command decided to pretend it never happened. The survivors got folded into new units or scrubbed entirely. I guess I drew the short straw. The judge's eyes darkened. And your family? They believed the story, she said quietly. That I never served. That I faked it. They didn't even ask why I disappeared for 4 years. They just filled in the blanks with whatever made sense. He rubbed his forehead, sighing heavily. If I break confidentiality, if I confirm what I know, it becomes public record. That will put you in danger, Cole. You understand that? She nodded once. Danger's familiar territory, sir. A faint, sad smile crossed his face. Still the same. Marin looked down at her hands. The scars across her knuckles were pale now, healed but visible. I didn't come here to prove anything, she said. I came because they sued me for being something I already stopped being a long time ago. He frowned, a soldier. A daughter. The words hit him harder than she expected. He didn't reply right away, just studied her, then finally asked, What do you want me to do? She hesitated. Just tell the truth, not for me, for the record, the real one. He nodded slowly, a decision settling over him. Then we'll do it properly, but it won't be easy. Nothing worth it ever is, she said. When Marin stepped outside, the sunlight was too bright, the noise too loud. Her lawyer was waiting on the steps, face pale. What happened in there? He asked. She just said he remembered. That night, the news hit the airwaves. Breaking. Federal judge in Cole versus Cole recuses himself following revelation of prior military connection to defendant. The headline spun fast. Some called it a scandal, others called it staged. Her family's attorney pounced on it immediately, claiming bias. The judge's statement cannot be considered credible, he told reporters. This is an emotional fabrication orchestrated for sympathy. And just like that, the noise swallowed the truth again. Marin didn't respond publicly. She sat alone in her small rented cabin outside Charleston, the kind of place where the night actually got dark. The news anchor's voice crackled faintly on the radio. Sources indicate Judge Henry Maddox was stationed in Afghanistan during the same years the defendant claims to have served. She turned it off. Silence again. She reached for the box under her bed, a weathered metal case she hadn't opened in years. Inside, one tarnished dog tag, a folded patch, a handful of photographs, faces half-lit by desert firelight, a laugh frozen mid-breath. And one photo of her and Maddox, years younger, both covered in dust, exhaustion and adrenaline in their eyes. He'd signed the back of it once during recovery, "For the ghost who saved me." She ran her thumb over the words. Ghost, that's what she'd been ever since. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She hesitated, then answered, Cole. A familiar voice came through, rough, older. You still take calls this late, sniper? Her chest tightened. Micah. Yeah, he said, chuckling softly. Still breathing, barely. Heard about the circus. You okay? Define okay. That bad, huh? She smiled faintly. Micah was one of the few from Glasslight who'd made it home. They hadn't spoken in years, each too busy pretending they'd moved on. I didn't think anyone still remembered, she said. Oh, we remember, he said. We just learned to shut up about it. Some ghosts don't like to be called out. Why now, she asked. Because your name's back in circulation, he said. And that means someone higher-up's watching. Be careful, Cole. You start digging into classified graves and something eventually crawls out. She was silent for a moment. You still have your field log. Buried, why? I need it, she said. I need to prove we existed. He sighed. You sure you want to go down that road again? I don't have a choice. Micah's voice softened. You always did. 3 days later, she met him in a diner off Highway 41. He looked older, heavier in the shoulders, but the eyes were still sharp. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Everything I could salvage before command wiped the archives. Not much, but enough to piss someone off. She opened it carefully. Photos, mission logs, coordinates. One line caught her breath. Cole confirmed extraction .0247 local. Unit compromised. Civilian casualties 2. Survivors 3. Proof, not enough for the world, but enough for her. She looked up. Why help me? He sipped his coffee, shrugging. Because I owe you a life, and because you were the only one who ever gave a damn about doing it right. Her throat tightened. You know they'll come for you if they find out. He smiled. They already did. This is me coming back from the dead. When he left, she sat there for a long time, the envelope between her hands. It wasn't just evidence. It was memory, hard, fragile, real. The next hearing was set for the following week. New judge, new witnesses, same war. Her family entered the courtroom like royalty attending their own coronation. Vanessa in black silk, her parents poised. They believed it was over, that without Maddox, Marin's story would collapse under its own weight. But when the bailiff called her name, Marin walked in with quiet certainty. Her lawyer carried the envelope Micah had given her. The attorney for her family stood again, confident. Miss Cole, since your alleged commanding officer has been disqualified from this case, I ask again, can you provide any verifiable proof that you served in Kandahar? Marin's gaze was calm. Yes. She nodded to Latham, who stepped forward and placed the photos on the table. These images were taken during Operation Glasslight, he said. They include timestamp coordinates, ballistic logs, and chain-of-command tags verified by internal metadata. You'll notice the judge in several of them, along with other personnel. The attorney's smile faltered. This proves nothing could be doctored. Then call the source, Marin said. Who? She turned toward the back of the courtroom. The door opened. Micah stepped in, his limp pronounced but his presence steady. The courtroom rustled with whispers. He walked straight to the stand. Name, the bailiff asked. Sergeant Micah Reyes, U.S. Army, retired. And your connection to the defendant? He looked at Marin. She saved my life twice, once in Kandahar, once in silence. The words hung there. The attorney sputtered. There's no record of your unit either. That's because we weren't supposed to exist, Micah said evenly. We were Ghost Recon, support team for NATO field ops, classified under Project Glasslight. Cole was our sniper. Best damn one I ever saw. Convenient story, the lawyer said. Reyes leaned forward. Convenient doesn't get you home alive, counselor. Even the judge couldn't hide a flicker of reaction. Marin sat still, her face unreadable, but her pulse was steady again for the first time in months. The lawyer flipped through the photos again, searching for cracks, for something to twist. If this operation was so secret, he said, why are you revealing it now? Micah looked at him dead in the eye. Because I'm tired of watching the living get buried twice. The courtroom was silent. After the session, Marin stepped outside. The sky was overcast, the kind that promised rain but held it back just long enough to tease you. Micah followed her out, his hands in his jacket pockets. You think it's enough? Doesn't matter, she said. They'll twist it, they always do. He nodded slowly. Then why fight? She looked at him, the wind tugging at her hair. Because someone has to remind them that silence isn't the same as guilt. He smiled faintly, still stubborn. Still breathing, she said. They stood there for a moment, two soldiers with too many memories and not enough words. Take care of yourself, Cole, he said finally. You too, Sarge. When he walked away, the first drop of rain hit her hand, cold, clean, real. She tilted her head up, letting it wash over her face. In the distance, thunder rolled. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't flinch. Because she'd already survived the storm. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It came in steady sheets, not furious but relentless, the kind that blurred the horizon and made the world feel small. Marin watched it streak down the cabin window, the sound like static whispering old memories. Outside, the forest breathed in fog. Inside, her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Headlines again, commentary, the kind that smiled as it twisted the knife. Veteran or fraud, court in chaos after secret mission claims. Family of alleged soldier alleges deepfake evidence. Operation Ghost, the hoax behind the hero. They were winning the narrative again. She turned off the screen, tossed the phone onto the table. The silence after the click was louder than the rain. Across the room, her lawyer, Latham, sat hunched over the pile of documents Micah had handed over. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that seeps past the eyes and into the soul. This isn't enough, he muttered, flipping through the grainy photos. They'll say these are forged. We need more than images. We need command signatures, mission transcripts, anything traceable. Marin stared at the window. There aren't any, they wiped them. He rubbed his temples. Then we're building a house with no foundation. She looked at him. It's not a house, Tom, it's a grave. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not buried in it. He met her gaze, something like pity flickering there. You think the judge can really help? Marin hesitated. Judge Maddox hadn't spoken to her since that day in court. His recusal had been immediate, his statement official but impersonal. But something in his eyes before he stepped down, something in the tremor of his voice, had told her the story wasn't finished. "He owes me the truth," she said. The next morning, a knock came at the cabin door. She opened it to find a courier, military seal, no return address. Inside the envelope, one folded sheet, "Meet me where it ended, M." Her breath caught Maddox. The place it ended, she knew exactly where that was. The convoy route outside Kandahar, the scar in the earth that had once been their extraction point. She folded the note slowly, her fingers trembling not from fear but from recognition. Ghosts don't stay buried, they wait. That night she boarded a transport headed for D.C., then onward. The flight was long, quiet, heavy with turbulence and memory. Every shudder in the fuselage felt like the echo of rotor blades, every flicker of light like tracer fire flashing through desert dark. She slept only once, and even then the dream came back, the same one she'd had for years. The boy on the rooftop, the satchel, the hesitation, the blast that followed. When she woke, her palms were wet. The plane window showed nothing but clouds. "Still there?" she whispered to no one. Maddox met her at a memorial site outside Arlington, a private section fenced off, marked only by a bronze plaque. He wasn't in robes now, just a man in a worn overcoat carrying something heavier than law. "You came," he said softly. "You asked." He nodded. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like it remembered. "I made inquiries," he said. "Off the record, Glasslight wasn't just sealed, it was buried. Black budget, unacknowledged operations, the kind Congress pretends never existed." She said nothing, just listened. "I found fragments," he continued. "Deployment manifests, encrypted transmissions, enough to confirm what you and Sergeant Reyes said in court." He looked up, eyes grim. "Then last night the files vanished again, purged, every trace." Marin frowned. "Purged by who?" "That's what I don't know, but whoever it is, they have clearance above mine." He handed her a flash drive. "This is what I could recover before the deletion. You'll want to keep it somewhere no one can reach." She took it carefully like it might burn. "You're risking your career." He smiled faintly. "You risked more for me." The silence stretched between them. Two people bound by something both would rather forget. Finally, he said, "There's one more thing. Your sister filed a motion this morning. They're not just contesting your benefits anymore." Marin looked up sharply. "Then what?" "They're charging you with fraud, federal." Her stomach dropped. "On what basis?" He hesitated. "They submitted new evidence, bank transfers, communications, flight records, allegedly showing you were in the States during the years of your deployment." Her pulse spiked. "That's impossible." He nodded slowly. "Which means someone forged them." For a moment the world tilted. The memorial around them blurred, the names on the bronze plaques swimming. "They're rewriting me again," she whispered. Maddox's voice was quiet. "And this time they're doing it on paper." By the time she reached Charleston again, the storm had followed. Her lawyer met her outside the courthouse, soaked and breathless. "They moved up the hearing, tomorrow morning. They're coming hard, Marin." "Let them," she said. But inside, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night she plugged in the flash drive. The files inside were fragmented, half-corrupted videos, broken transcripts, metadata logs. But one folder caught her eye. Glasslight AAR 112. After Action Report. She clicked it open. Mission date, 12 April 2012. Location, Kandahar Province, AO Delta 7. Operative, Cole M. Sniper Recon. Summary, successful retrieval of wounded officer Maddox H. Secondary detonation, cause undetermined. Civilian casualties confirmed. Orders received to sanitize site. Directive, erase presence. Her chest tightened. Erase presence. The video file beside it flickered alive, grainy night vision green. The convoy in flames. A voice shouting over comms. Cole, get him out now. Then the blast, static in her own voice, target down. I repeat, target down, requesting evac. The file cut off. Proof irrefutable. She exhaled, tears mixing with rain leaking through the window frame. The next morning, the courthouse felt colder than usual. Her family sat clustered like a portrait, perfect, polished, poisonous. Vanessa's smile was razor-thin. When the judge called her name, Marin rose, flash drive in hand. But before she could speak, Vanessa's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we have new evidence. He handed the clerk a folder. These are certified documents obtained through federal channels, Department of Defense correspondence, travel logs, and communications signed by Colonel Jensen, verifying that the defendant, Marin Cole, was employed as a civilian consultant during the years she claims to have served. Marin froze. Her lawyer flipped through the pages, disbelief spreading across his face. These are forged. The judge frowned. On what grounds? They're too clean, Latham said. Too consistent. Every document conveniently supports their claim. That's not coincidence, that's construction. Vanessa crossed her arms. Or maybe it's the truth you've been hiding. Marin stepped forward, voice calm but sharp. You really think I'd fake a war that still wakes me up screaming? Her sister smirked. People fake worse for less. Something in Marin's chest cracked then. Not anger, not grief, but exhaustion. She looked at her parents. Her father's gaze was cold, unreadable. Her mother looked away. You believe this? She asked them quietly. After everything. Her mother's lips pressed thin. Belief has nothing to do with it, Marin. Proof does. The judge sighed, motioning for order. Miss Cole, do you have any rebuttal? Marin hesitated, then nodded. I do. She handed the flash drive to the bailiff. This contains mission footage, recovered data logs, and a written directive from the Glasslight archives. It verifies my deployment and the classified nature of the operation. The opposing attorney scoffed. Convenient timing, don't you think? But when the footage played, the room changed. The screen showed chaos, smoke, fire, voices shouting through static. Then the camera steadied. A young man, bloodied, barely conscious, being dragged through sand by a soldier in desert fatigues. Her. And in the corner of the frame, Maddox's face. The room fell silent. The judge leaned forward. Pause. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned to Marin. This was you. She nodded once. The judge exhaled. Where did you get this? From the man you replaced, she said quietly. Outside the courthouse, the air broke open. Reporters shouted, flashes popped, questions flew like bullets. Marin didn't stop, didn't answer. Behind her, Vanessa's voice cut through the noise. You think this changes anything? You think anyone cares about your little ghost stories? Marin turned then slowly. Her eyes calm, steady. No, she said. I don't think they care, but I do, and I can live with that. She walked away, leaving her sister standing in the rain. Because for the first time, Marin wasn't trying to win. She was just done being erased. That night she sat on the cabin porch, watching the rain ease into mist. The flash drive rested on the table beside her, tiny, unremarkable, and yet it held everything they'd tried to bury. Her phone buzzed, a message from Maddox. Be careful, you've poked something that doesn't like light. She typed back, then let it burn. Outside, thunder rolled again, distant but coming closer. And in its echo, she heard the war whisper back, soft, low, proud. Not as a warning, but as a promise. She noticed the car first. A black sedan idling too long at the end of the gravel road leading to her cabin. Headlights off, engine low, just waiting. Marin didn't move. She stood at the window, coffee cooling in her hand, heart steady but aware. It wasn't paranoia if you'd lived through being hunted before. She set the mug down silently, eyes scanning the tree line. No movement, no sound but the hum of insects. but instinct, sharp, trained, merciless, told her she wasn't alone. Someone was watching. She slipped her sidearm from the drawer under the table. Old habits never died, they just got quieter. The flash drive still sat on the desk where she'd left it the night before, next to a folded map, and the letter from Maddox warning her she'd poked something that doesn't like light. Guess he was right. The headlights flared once, then darkness again. Marin didn't wait to see what came next. She grabbed the drive, stuffed it in the pocket of her jacket, and moved for the back door. Outside, the air was damp and heavy with pine. The ground muffled her steps. The moon hung low behind a web of clouds, enough light to move, not enough to be seen. She cut through the woods, following the creek downhill. Her boots sank slightly into the mud, but she didn't slow. Somewhere behind her, a car door shut, then another. Voices, two, maybe three. Male, confident, professional. Not reporters. Her breath came steady, controlled. Every nerve alert, every sense alive. She reached the edge of the tree line, crouched low and watched. Three men, tactical jackets, no insignia, moving with precision. One carried a scanner, sweeping the area with slow, practiced arcs. They weren't amateurs, they were here for her. She tapped her earpiece, a habit more than a function. It wasn't even connected anymore, but the gesture grounded her, focused her. Her mind mapped the terrain automatically. Slope, angles, visibility, range, potential choke points. The creek curved west toward an abandoned ranger station, a fallback point she'd scouted months ago without even knowing why. Now she did. She moved. The woods swallowed her. Branches brushed her jacket, the sound drowned beneath the rush of the stream. Behind her, one of the men called out, "She's on foot." So they knew she was alone. Good, let them think that made her weaker. She smiled without humor. "You never chase a sniper in her own line of sight," she whispered. The ranger station loomed ahead, its roof half collapsed, windows broken. Perfect. She slipped inside, staying low. Dust and damp wood filled her lungs. She reached into the old supply cabinet, pulling out what she'd stashed there months earlier. A field kit, a small scope, and a flare gun she'd modified into something louder. Outside, the crunch of boots drew closer. She set the scope on the windowsill, scanning. One man was approaching from the south ridge, another looping toward the creek. The third, silent, unseen, was circling wide. Classic pincer, efficient, predictable. She took the flare gun, aimed it high, and fired. The red streak cut through the sky, blinding against the clouds. The forest lit up in bloodlight. For a split second the men froze, then instinct kicked in. They ducked, scanning upward. That was all she needed. She moved, silent, fast, down the slope through shadow. She hit the creek, crossed waist deep in freezing water, then climbed the opposite ridge. When she turned, one of the men was standing exactly where she'd been. He looked confused. Then the modified flare in the station's window detonated. Not an explosion, just a shockwave loud enough to disorient, bright enough to blind. She didn't stay to watch. By the time they regrouped, she was gone. She reached the highway before dawn. Her truck was parked behind an old service station where she'd left it 2 days earlier. She climbed in, heart still racing, and hit the ignition. Her phone buzzed, unknown number again. She answered, voice low, "Cole." A pause, then Micah's voice, urgent. "They came to my house last night." She froze. "Who?" "I don't know, black SUVs, no plates. They tore the place apart, I barely got out." Her grip tightened on the wheel. "You still have your copy of the data?" "I did, they took it." She swore under her breath. "Then they're cleaning up. Anyone who can verify Glasslight is next." Micah's voice was ragged. "They want the drive, Marin. Whatever you've got, it's the last piece." She looked down at her jacket pocket. The tiny flash drive felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "I can't keep it," she said. "Then give it to someone who can. You know who." She did, Maddox. But getting it to him meant crossing the same people who were erasing her life in real time. "I'll handle it," she said finally. "Cole." "Stay dark, Micah. Don't call again." She hung up. The sky ahead was streaked with gray dawn. She drove fast, the kind of focused speed that left no room for fear. The radio stayed off. The hum of the engine was the only sound she trusted. By noon she was on the outskirts of D.C., rain turning to fog. Every car in the mirror felt like a shadow, every face in the crowd a watcher. She parked 2 blocks from the federal courthouse. No cameras, no press, just a normal day on the surface. Inside, Maddox was waiting in a small conference room alone. His eyes were tired, but his posture was steady. "You weren't followed?" he asked. "Probably," she said, "but they won't get close enough twice." He nodded. "You brought it." She pulled the flash drive from her pocket and set it on the table. "They already know it exists. You're safer keeping it than I am." He hesitated. "You're sure?" "I stopped being safe the day they buried my file." He took the drive carefully. "What's on it?" "Proof of glasslight, names, orders, coordinates, enough to expose them or get us both killed." He exhaled slowly. "Then we tread carefully." "Careful doesn't work anymore," she said. "They already came for Micah." Maddox's face hardened. "Then we hit first." She frowned. "That's not your job anymore, Judge." He looked at her, something burning behind his calm exterior. "It stopped being about jobs the day they tried to erase you. I owe you my life, Cole. Let me help you protect yours." For a long moment neither spoke. The hum of the air vents was the only sound. Then she nodded. "Fine, but we do it my way." They met that night in an underground parking lot near Georgetown. Maddox brought a laptop. Marin brought nothing but awareness. The plan was simple. Copy the drive, encrypt it, send it to multiple independent journalists with instructions for delayed release. If anything happened to them, the story would go live automatically. Simple, dangerous, effective. She kept watch while he worked, scanning every reflection, every sound. The walls smelled of oil and rain-soaked concrete. "Almost done," he murmured. That's when she heard it. The click of a door echoing through the stairwell. Then another. Her hand went instinctively to her sidearm. "We've got company." Maddox froze. "How many?" "3, maybe 4. He unplugged the drive, slid it into his pocket. "We can't let them get it." "Then move when I say move." They crouched behind a pillar. Shadows shifted across the far wall, dark, quick, coordinated. Whoever these men were, they knew what they were doing. Marin counted the footsteps, 3 coming from the stairwell, 1 circling from the garage exit. They were cutting off escape. She exhaled slowly. "On 3, she whispered. 1, 2. A voice rang out, amplified by the concrete. "Marin Cole, you've got something that doesn't belong to you." She smiled coldly. "Funny, that's exactly what I was thinking." Then she moved. The first shot wasn't lethal. She aimed low, ricochet, disorientation. The echo cracked through the garage, car alarms blaring instantly. Maddox dove behind a sedan as Marin rolled for cover, scanning angles. The men returned fire, controlled bursts, suppressive, professional. She waited for the rhythm, counted breaths between shots, and fired once. The bullet clipped the lead man's shoulder, sending him sprawling. The others hesitated, just long enough. "Go," she shouted. Maddox ran for the stairwell, clutching the drive. She covered him, moving backward with precision, using pillars and vehicles as shields. Her movements were fluid, practiced, almost graceful. One of the men lunged from the left. She swung the butt of her pistol into his throat, grabbed his rifle mid-fall, and used it to pin him down. "Who sent you?" she hissed. He didn't answer, just sneered. "You should have stayed buried, Cole." She struck once, clean, fast, and he went silent. By the time she reached the stairs, Maddox was already gone. Good. She turned back to the garage, sirens in the distance, red-blue lights flickering faint through the rain. She holstered her weapon, blending into the shadows as security swarmed in. By the time they searched the scene, she was gone again, another ghost in the system that had created her. Maddox called her 2 hours later. "It's done," he said. "Encrypted and sent. If we vanish, it releases in 72 hours. She leaned against a cold brick wall in some forgotten alley, listening to the hum of traffic far above. "Then we just bought 72 hours of war." He was silent for a long moment. "They'll come harder now." "I'm counting on it," she said. "Why?" "Because the only way to stop a cover-up," she said, "is to drag it screaming into daylight." That night, Marin didn't go back to the cabin. She knew it was compromised. Instead, she found refuge in a half-abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. She sat against the wall, rifle across her lap, the faint hum of neon buzzing above. Every muscle ached. Every thought circled the same question: was truth worth the cost of peace? She'd seen what happened when secrets stayed buried, innocent people forgotten, guilty ones rewarded. But she'd also seen what happened when the truth came out too late. Some truths saved no one. Her radio scanner crackled suddenly. A male voice, distorted, came through. "Cole, we see you." She froze. Then through the far window, a red laser dot swept across the wall. She dove aside as glass shattered, bullets tearing through the space she'd been sitting in seconds before. She hit the ground, rolling, rifle up, scanning. 3 silhouettes on the rooftop opposite, night vision glinting. She exhaled once, steadying her aim. "Let's finish what you started," she whispered. And the war came back, not the one in Kandahar, but the one that never ended. How do you run from a life that knows your face better than your own reflection? She left the warehouse in the dark between one heartbeat and the next, slipping out through a side door she'd scouted in 30 seconds of sleep-deprived reconnaissance. The city around her breathed its usual night rhythm: traffic, late-shift lights, a dog barking somewhere down a corridor of brick. But under that ordinary surface throbbed a different pulse: danger, hunger, an animal that could smell fear. Marin moved like someone who knew how to disappear. She traversed alleyways, crossed underpass shadows, threaded through construction zones where workers left equipment for the night and left the concrete like skeletons. Her pack was light, the rifle slung low, pistol in its soft holster, the spare mags, water, a dried protein bar tucked in a side pouch. She'd learned to travel lean. Weight gave away position. Noise gave away intention. She could hear sirens win over the river, far enough not to matter to her immediate route. The encrypted drops had been triggered. The journalists who would carry the files were already on the grid. That gave her an odd, bitter relief. She'd done the hard thing. Now she had to live long enough for others to make it count. That was the calculus now: survive, then let truth do the rest. The first safe house was a 2-room apartment 3 stories up in an old brick building, neutral, nondescript. It belonged to a woman named Anna, an old contact from a forgotten resupply line in Kandahar. Anna answered the door without surprise, as if Marin walking into rooms at odd hours were a normal occurrence. "Late," Anna said, voice a rasp softened by cigarette smoke. Her apartment smelled of spices and wet wool. "You look hunted." "Because I am," Marin said. She dropped her pack and slid the rifle into a corner. Her hands trembled just enough for her to notice, not from fear, from too much adrenaline. Anna poured tea and slid a battered phone across the table. "Secure line, use it. I've got bread and a shower. You stink like a trench coat." Marin let out a breath that could have been a laugh. Things that had felt important once, the cleanliness of your shirt, the folding of a tie, had become small sanctuaries during war. A hot shower now felt like a minor miracle. "Who's trailing you?" Anna asked when they were alone. "Contractors or ex-military cleaned up with contractor paychecks. No insignia, trained, quiet. Marin's voice was flat, precise. She always made lists in tense situations. It made the chaos into something manageable. Anna nodded. They don't like leaks. They don't like living men who remember. Marin swallowed. Memory had become evidence, and evidence was a threat. She tapped the side of the flash drive's case where it lived in a hidden seam inside her jacket. It felt small, insignificant in daylight. In the dark, it was everything. "We can move it again," Anna said. "Third contact out of state if you're willing." "How far?" Marin asked. "2 cities," Anna said. "Safe, costly, but clean." Marin thought of Micah's face when the men had smashed through his door, of the way Maddox had flinched when they'd almost been overtaken at the garage. "Do it," she said finally. "If it gets the files out, it's worth the price." Anna looked at her like she'd seen the decision before and didn't think she was wrong for it. "You always were difficult," she said, "in the best way." She kept moving. The daytime city was a different animal. People with mundane errands boiled into her paths, coffee runs, dog walkers, a man arguing on the phone about paint colors. Marin threaded between them, a camouflage of regular life. She rode a bus for a few stops, watched faces, recorded details like the cadence of footsteps and the angle of a smile. She kept her head down but her awareness up. This was how you survived when the enemy was blended into the crowd. At a transfer point, something snagged at the corner of her eye. A kid with a backpack, face smudged with street grit, looking too young for his shoes. His eyes met hers for a second, no recognition, only a flicker of curiosity, and then he turned away. She thought about how war gets recycled into daily life, how children would find the soldiers' shape familiar and terrifying all at once. She remembered the boy on the Kandahar rooftop and tasted the same stale guilt at the back of her throat. They moved the drive twice in total. The first courier was an old expressman who loved jazz and wore a coat that had seen better decades. The second courier was a line cook who'd grown up down the block from Anna and owed a favor for a time. Someone had covered his shift. They were not warriors. They were people made brave by small obligations and the belief that sometimes you might do the right thing because it needed doing. At night, when the adrenaline fell away, Marin couldn't sleep. She lay with her eyes open, listening to the hum of an unfamiliar apartment, the fan's shallow noise. Memory, uninvited, crowded in the smell of diesel, the metallic tang of blood, the heavy sound of a man who had almost died breathing. She tried to separate herself from the person in the photographs, to see how much of Marin was owned by memory and how much by duty. Most nights, the line blurred. They had a lead. One of the contractors who tried to grab Maddox at the garage had a tattoo on his wrist. A simple linework pattern that Anna recognized from a security contractor forum. A user with that handle had posted logistics questions for unusual shipments in the past month. The contractor's name was not public, but it was traceable to a Shell LLC that rented storage units in a gray industrial district. Marin and Anna went after it. The storage units reeked of cold metal and stale cardboard. Security cameras watched everything, flat eyes on everything that passed under them. This was a place where people kept things because they believed no one would ever look. Marin didn't like the idea. Things get found if people look long enough. They rented a locker under fake IDs, Anna's old touch. Marin pried at boxes, hollowed out false bottoms where smugglers hid awkward bundles, but this unit held only junk, crates of electronics, a defunct server rack. Then she heard it, a whisper of compressed plastic. She knelt, opened a cardboard box, and found a stack of ballistic vests, military grade, and under them a small black case. Another flash drive, not her file but a list, names, dates, bank transfers. It was a ledger. "You sure?" Anna breathed. Marin's fingers moved like memory. She thumbed through, reading names. One name caught her like a hand on the back of the neck, a senator's aide. Another, a logistics company tied back to a shell corporation based in a state 2 flights away. Someone high was cleaning house. "You got what we need," Anna said. "No," Marin answered. "We got a map. And maps can be followed." The hunt widened. not only across parking lots and cheap hotels, but into the safe rooms of power. Names on the ledger led to a logistics company that handled discreet shipments for shadow clients. The company showed up on paper as a benign freight broker for humanitarian aid. In the backroom, it moved far different cargo. Insurance policies shielded everything. Shell accounts laundered money through countries with names people barely remembered. They moved fast. 3 nights later, Marin found herself trembling in a motel room with a cheap neon sign sifting like a heartbeat across the ceiling. Her phone had a single contact left, Maddox, and it felt smaller than it had on the first day. She thought about giving up the chase, about walking into a crowd and just letting life wash over her like a tide. But she'd learned that silence is how crimes become routine. She wasn't willing to be the reason that happened again. At dawn, she made a decision. The ledger's trail went to a cargo manifest, and that manifest had a sealed container scheduled to move in 24 hours. If someone tried to move evidence, she couldn't let it vanish. She called Maddox. "We'll cut them off at the pier," he said. The judge's voice had an edge now, a legal man learning the contours of danger. "You can't go alone." "I never did." Marin didn't have to say it. She'd always been a loner because it was easier to put others at risk than to let them bear the burden with her. Maddox showed up with 2 people she didn't know, a woman with navy hair and a man with close-cropped beard and hands that looked like they fixed engines for fun. They moved with an ease that said competence, not bravado. They trusted Maddox. That said something. They were not mercenaries. They were people who still believed in certain civic truths, things like process and accountability. They parked 3 blocks from the pier, legs pressed to the cold metal of the truck, breath visible in the morning air. The container yard was a moving puzzle. Cranes, semi-trailers, men with headsets, authority in vests. It felt both anonymous and grotesquely intimate, humans moving signatures and flesh as if they were interchangeable. Marin slid between pallets like a shadow. Her heart beat at a cadence she'd known intimately before, slow, precise, controlled. She found the manifest with a handheld scanner. A busy man with a clipboard left it by a trailer in a hurry. The container number matched the ledger. Inside could be bank transfers, hard drives, evidence they wanted to disappear. They waited until midnight. When the truck rolled in and the container's lock clicked open, they moved. Marin's breath caught. She saw what they were trying to hide, crates of decommissioned comms equipment. On first glance, banal. But amid the hardware lay a set of server drives wrapped in plastic, encrypted data caches. Someone had intended to ship them out and erase them somewhere else. Before she could check them, lights snapped on. Radios crackled. "Stop, you there, halt." They had been spotted. Someone inside the yard had made the call. The time elapsed between discovery and reaction was impossible to bridge with stealth. It was a race. Marin didn't hesitate. She sprinted, grabbing the sealed drivers, slinging them across her shoulder. Maddox and his team created a diversion, screaming, pointing, a staged scuffle that pulled eyes away. Sirens bit the air as security closed in. They ran. The chase took them across the yard, under the crane's long arms, through the stacked shadows of containers where echoes swallowed sound. A guard took a shot that ricocheted overhead. Metal screamed. The world contracted to the thump of footsteps and the rush of breath. They reached the truck and rolled into the back, breathing hard, hearts in their throats. Maddox slammed the doors shut. The truck rolled as if on automatic, merging into the night traffic, ordinary as a milk run. Marin sat back, pressed to the cold metal wall, the server drives like a burden heavier than the flash drive. She thought of the boy on the rooftop and the man she dragged through sand. She thought of Micah's smashed house. She thought of Anna and the expressmen. Everyone she loved had become stakes in a game someone else had started. "We can't keep doing this forever," Maddox said softly behind her. She looked up at him. "We don't have forever," and she meant it. Outside, the city rolled on, lights blurring into the Black River. Someone somewhere still believed that bureaucracy could hide everything. She believed it could hide a lot, but not faces, not scars, not the stubborn memory of people who refused both to be forgotten and to let injustice stand unopposed. As the truck pulled away from the pier, Marin hunched forward, nerves taut as bowstrings. The stolen drives hummed somewhere against her side. The chase would continue. They'd have to be smarter, harder, faster. And she would, because the alternative was putting her head down and letting the rot continue. She wasn't built for quiet endings. She closed her eyes for a second and breathed. For once, the breath felt like a decision rather than a reflex. Ahead, the road bent into fog. Behind, shadows sharpened. She thought of the moral tally, what exposing the truth might cost innocent lives, and counted aloud very softly so she could hear herself. "One truth at a time," she said. "One life we can save." The truck ate the night. They drove until the night gave up its color. Highway lights thinned, towns vanished, and the road stretched like a scar across the dark. Marin sat in the truck's passenger seat, head tilted toward the window. Her reflection looked ghost-pale in the glass. Behind her, the stolen server drives were strapped beneath a tarp. They hummed faintly, a mechanical heartbeat that kept time with the low growl of the engine. Maddox drove in silence. His jaw worked like he was chewing thoughts he didn't want to swallow. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the windshield still gleamed with the residue of it, tiny worlds of light that split and rejoined as they sped through the emptiness. Finally, he said, "We can't keep running blind. We need a name." Marin nodded. "We'll have one soon. Those drives, they'll have logs, transfer routes, payment codes. Somebody signed those authorizations. Somebody high enough to make entire missions disappear," he muttered. She looked at him. "You ever wonder why you survived Kandahar?" He blinked, surprised by the question. "Because you pulled me out." "That's not what I meant. They covered the operation. They wiped the dead, but they let you live and keep your name." She turned back to the window. "That wasn't mercy, that was strategy." The words settled between them like dust. They reached a motel outside Baltimore just before dawn. The sign buzzed half-dead neon, "Rest Easy Inn." The irony made her almost laugh. Inside, Maddox set up a folding laptop on the small table. Marin stripped the plastic from the drives with a pocket knife and slid one into the port. A loading bar crawled across the screen. Encrypted deep, but not impossible. She leaned forward, hands steady. Code scrolled down the monitor, lines of meaningless symbols resolving into fragments of text. Shipment logs, bank routing numbers, encrypted emails. Then a folder appeared. GLOPS archival authorized by. She clicked. A single document filled the screen. Government letterhead. Redacted blocks like bullet holes in sentences, but one line was intact. Authorized by. Call Nathan R. Jensen. Her stomach dropped. "I've seen that name." Maddox nodded slowly. "So have I. He's chief liaison for defense oversight now. The man who testified last year that no unsanctioned ops took place under his command." "He lied," she said. "He always lies," Maddox replied, voice low. She kept scrolling. Under the authorization field was another section, expense transfer accounts. Dozens of payments routed through shell companies, one of which matched the ledger from the storage unit. The pattern was clear now. Cover the mission, bury the witnesses, launder the money. Maddox leaned back. "He's cleaning the trail all the way to Congress." Marin rubbed her temples. "Then we'll drag him out." "Careful," he said. "This isn't the desert. Here, people kill reputations before they kill bodies." She looked at him. "I've survived both." They reached out to Micah through a burner line. He answered on the second ring. "You alive?" Marin asked. "Barely. They tried my old safe house last night, missed me by 10 minutes. His voice carried the rasp of exhaustion. "Tell me you found something." "Colonel Jensen," she said. "He's our link." Micah swore softly. "Figures. He was the one who signed the evac order that never came. "We need proof of intent," Maddox said over her shoulder. "Something that shows he ordered the purge." Micah hesitated. "There's a secondary server, off-site, Jensen's private archive. I helped set it up before everything went sideways. If he stored anything personal, it's there." "Where?" Marin asked. "An abandoned relay station near Quantico. Looks dead, but it's running on independent power. I can get you in, but not remotely. You'll need hands-on access." She smiled faintly. "Then we go hands-on." By midnight, they were parked a mile from the relay site. The forest around it was skeletal, winter-thin branches creaking in the wind. Beyond them, a squat concrete building crouched under the moonlight. No lights, no guards, just the hum of generators underground. Marin checked her weapon, adjusted the suppressor. Maddox watched her with an unease he didn't bother hiding. "You've done this too many times," he said. "You haven't done it enough," she replied. They moved low through the trees. The night smelled of damp leaves and cold metal. When they reached the perimeter fence, she cut a small section and slipped through first. The ground was soft. Their footsteps vanished into mud. Inside, everything felt wrong, the kind of stillness that hides motion. They entered through a service door whose lock yielded to an old field knife and muscle memory. The corridor smelled of ozone and disuse. Emergency lights pulsed red every 10 seconds like a heartbeat. They found the main server room behind a reinforced door. Marin bypassed the keypad, fingers flying with practiced rhythm. The door hissed open. Rows of machines lined the walls, their LEDs flickering faintly, alive, awake. Maddox exhaled. So much for abandoned. Marin slid into the console chair, connecting their portable drive. "Give me 2 minutes." She worked fast. Layers of encryption peeled back. Directories appeared, dates, mission codes, payment summaries. Then a folder marked GL Aftermath. Inside, a series of video logs. She clicked the first one. The screen filled with Jensen's face. Years younger, uniform crisp, eyes dead calm. Transcript debrief 47. Subject Glasslight, collateral high. We proceed with full erasure. Survivors to be reassigned or terminated as needed. No civilian oversight. Maddox's hand tightened on the chair. He said terminated. Marin kept scrolling. Another file, newer, dated months ago. Audit complete. One operative unaccounted for. Cole, Marin L. presumed KIA, but traces resurfaced. Initiate containment. She froze. He'd signed her death years ago, and now he was signing her erasure. Behind them, the faint whine of an elevator echoed up the corridor. Maddox looked at her. "We have company." She pulled the drive, pocketed it. "We're leaving." They slipped back into the hallway just as the elevator doors opened below. Voices carried upward, 2, 3, maybe more. Boots on metal. They moved toward the north exit, but the stairwell door burst open ahead of them. Flashlights sliced through the dark. "Down!" Marin shoved Maddox behind a support beam as gunfire cracked. Sparks bit concrete, dust raining down. She fired twice, suppressor coughing softly. One assailant went down, the others scattered for cover. Maddox yelled over the din, "They're flanking us." "Then we don't give them time." She threw a smoke canister, grabbed his arm, and ran. Visibility vanished in gray. She knew the rhythm of chaos. She used it like camouflage. By the time the smoke cleared, they were outside, sprinting across the field toward the tree line. Behind them, alarms wailed. A bullet tore through her sleeve, grazing skin. She stumbled, bit down on a curse, kept moving. When they reached the truck, Maddox slammed the ignition. Gravel spat from the tires as they tore down the service road. "Drive faster," she said. "I'm already breaking laws I used to enforce." "Brake harder." The headlights carved through the fog. Behind them, another vehicle appeared, black SUV, lights off, gaining. Maddox glanced in the mirror. "They're closing." Marin rolled down the window, steadied her rifle against the frame. Keep it straight. She waited for the flash of headlights in the reflection of a roadside sign, then fired once. The front tire of the SUV exploded, the vehicle fishtailing before slamming into a ditch. Silence rushed in behind them. Maddox exhaled shakily. Remind me never to doubt your aim. She smiled without humor. Doubt's healthy, keeps you breathing. They didn't stop until they reached the outskirts of a small coastal town where dawn was just a pale thought behind clouds. They parked near the docks, engines ticking in the cool air. Maddox rested his forehead on the steering wheel. He'll know we were there. He already knew I was alive, she said. Now he knows I remember. She stepped out, stretching stiff muscles, staring at the horizon where the first light bent against water. Maddox joined her. What now? She looked down at the drive in her hand. We send it all, every log, every file, but this time not to journalists. They'll bury it in red tape. We leak it to the world. He frowned. That could spark an international incident. Maybe it should, she said quietly. People died for secrets they didn't choose to keep. He studied her profile in the growing light. You'll paint a target on yourself. It's already there. She turned toward him, eyes steady. Jensen built a system where truth is classified. I'm going to declassify it. He gave a weary, proud smile. You really don't know how to quit. I learned from the best, she said. You didn't quit that day in the desert. They stood in silence as the sun broke through, thin, pale, but real. For the first time in years, the warmth felt earned. Back in the truck, Marin set up the connection. The files uploaded slowly, percentage by percentage, onto a secure drop that would scatter them across networks once complete. Each percent was a heartbeat, a risk, a defiance. Halfway through, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered. A familiar, cold voice. You've made powerful enemies, Corporal Cole. Turn over what you took and maybe you'll live long enough to regret it. She smiled faintly. Colonel Jensen took you long enough to call. His tone stayed even. You think truth protects you. Truth is whatever survives the edit. Then let's see whose version lasts longer. She hung up. The upload hit 99%. Maddox watched the screen. Once it's out there, there's no taking it back. Good, she said. Some things shouldn't be taken back. The bar reached 100. Transmission complete. She leaned back, exhaling. For the first time, her shoulders dropped. The war wasn't over, but the silence was broken. Outside, gulls cried over the water. The wind carried salt and rain and something like peace. Maddox looked at her, quiet. What will you do now? Marin watched the horizon. Disappear again, but this time on my own terms. He nodded. If they come for you. They already did, she said, faint smile returning. And I'm still here. She stepped out of the truck, wind tugging at her jacket. For a long moment she just stood there. No medals, no audience, just dawn and consequence. Sometimes victory wasn't loud. Sometimes it was breathing, still standing, refusing to vanish. She walked toward the edge of the pier, the sea reflecting the first full light of morning. The world felt raw, unfinished, but alive. Behind her, Maddox called softly, You did good, Marine. She didn't turn. I just stopped lying. The sun climbed higher, cutting through the mist. And in that light, for the first time since Kandahar, Marin Cole finally looked like someone who belonged to herself. The story broke before sunrise. One upload became 100 mirrors. By mid-morning, 1,000 headlines screamed across screens from D.C. to Dubai. Classified U.S. operation exposed. Whistleblower veteran names top officials. Ghost program confirmed. Every feed played the same shaky clips. The Kandahar footage, the ledger screenshots, Jensen's recorded orders. And in every loop, one name flashed beneath the images like a heartbeat. Marin Cole. She watched it happen from a safe house 3 states away, sitting on the edge of a narrow cot, coffee untouched, the small TV flickering blue across her face. Her hair was damp from rain. The news anchor's voice was calm, practiced neutrality straining against chaos. Sources confirmed the leaks originated from a secure uplink late last night. The Department of Defense has neither confirmed nor denied the authenticity of the files. Colonel Nathan Jensen has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Maddox paced near the window, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I understand that, Senator," he said quietly, "but the footage is real. Denying it will only deepen the fallout." Marin tuned him out. The screen showed protests already forming outside the Capitol, banners waving, camera flashes sparking like static. People demanding accountability, others calling it treason. Truth never arrived clean. It came dragging politics and outrage behind it. She muted the volume. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the sound of the world trying to rearrange itself around a wound. By noon, the first counterattack began. Government spokespeople filled podiums, an ongoing investigation, a coordinated misinformation campaign. Foreign interference cannot be ruled out. Jensen's lawyer appeared on a news channel within hours. "My client denies all allegations. These files are doctored. The so-called operative, Marin Cole, is a disturbed individual facing multiple fraud charges." Maddox shut off the TV. "They're moving faster than we can respond." "That's what systems do," she said quietly. "They defend themselves." He sat opposite her. "We'll need to testify. Congress will form a committee within days. They'll subpoena both of us." She stared at the cracked floor tile between her boots. "You still think they'll listen?" "They'll have to." She looked up. They didn't have to in Kandahar. He didn't argue. There was nothing to say. Outside the safe house, reporters swarmed like insects around a light they couldn't find. One of Anna's contacts smuggled supplies through the back alley, food, burner phones, cash. Marin rarely left the second floor. Her face was everywhere now. Anonymity had evaporated. At night she scrolled through feeds, watching people argue about her existence. Ghost Veteran trended worldwide. Some called her a hero. Others called her a fraud, a fabrication created to destabilize the government. She thought of the irony, how easy it was to erase someone with paperwork, and how hard it was to restore them with truth. Micah called once, voice rough but alive. "You broke the dam, Cole. Half the contractors are scattering, dumping hard drives into rivers. They're scared." "They should be." "Word is, Jensen's going to testify. He's cutting deals already." She felt nothing. Deals don't resurrect the dead. Micah paused. "Be careful. When power starts eating itself, it gets hungry." 2 days later, Maddox woke her before dawn. "They found us," he said simply. She was on her feet before she fully woke. "How?" "Cell tower ping. One of Anna's phones got traced." Through the blinds she saw unmarked cars settling at the end of the street. Not a raid yet, just surveillance tightening its ring. Maddox pulled a manila envelope from his coat. "If they take me, this goes to the press, unredacted." She took it, weighing the paper like a weapon. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I've spent my life behind a bench, time I stood for something." Before she could stop him, he stepped out the back door into the gray morning. She watched from the stairwell window as he walked straight to the waiting cars, hands raised. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters shouted his name. The sacrifice was calculated. Give them a public surrender so she could disappear again. For the next 48 hours, the news ran his image. Judge Henry Maddox detained in connection with leaked files. Some called him complicit. Others called him courageous. He said nothing. Silence became his statement. Marin moved north under false ID, trains and back roads, sleeping in motels that smelled of old smoke and cheap soap. Everywhere she went, Screens showed her story fractured through opinion. Panels debated her sanity. Military analysts dissected her missions like rumors. One talk show host asked, if she truly served, why hide? She whispered back at the TV, because you never looked when I was visible. In a diner outside Portland, she overheard two truckers talking. That coal woman, one said, crazy or brave? The other shrugged. Maybe both. Sometimes you gotta be crazy to tell the truth. It was the first time she smiled in days. Meanwhile, Washington convulsed. Leaked transcripts revealed Jensen's communications, proof of black budget funds and covert erasures. Investigators raided offices. Senators distanced themselves. The defense secretary resigned. But for every door forced open, another slammed shut. Files vanished. Witnesses retired. The machinery of secrecy shifted shape, learning how to survive its own exposure. And still, across the world, people watched. In Kabul, a journalist replayed the footage of the convoy explosion and whispered a prayer for names finally spoken aloud. In Berlin, veterans gathered in a bar, raising glasses to a soldier they'd never met. In Charleston, Marin's grandmother sat alone at her kitchen table, tears tracing quiet lines as she watched the granddaughter everyone thought was gone walk across a television screen, alive and unbroken. A week passed. Marin settled in a cabin near the coast, rented under an alias that wouldn't hold long but gave her space to breathe. The sea outside was gray, restless. She walked the shore at night when no one watched, letting the wind erase her footprints before she could look back. She carried a small radio everywhere, tuned low to static between stations. One evening it caught a signal, an independent journalist reading an excerpt from Maddox's sealed testimony. If a nation can erase its soldiers to protect its pride, then it has already lost more than any enemy could take. We owe them their names. Her throat tightened. She turned off the radio and listened to the ocean instead. It sounded like applause and warning at once. The next morning brought a new headline. Colonel Jensen found dead in apparent suicide. Maddox's statement followed hours later. The truth was heavier than he could carry. Marin didn't believe in neat endings. Jensen hadn't been a lone architect. He was one gear in a machine built on silence. Killing a man didn't kill the system, but it bought the world's attention for one more day, and sometimes a day was enough to start change. By afternoon, the Justice Department announced hearings. Families of erased operatives were identified, compensated. A new law was drafted, the Veterans Transparency Act. Words on paper, fragile but real. Marin watched from the cabin, face unreadable. Hope was dangerous. She learned that in deserts and courtrooms alike. Still, when the anchor said her name, the whistleblower credited with exposing the ghost program, she felt something unfamiliar bloom behind her ribs. Not pride, just release. That night she wrote a single letter. To whoever comes after me. Truth isn't a medal, it's a mirror. Look into it long enough and you'll see everyone, enemy, ally, and yourself. If you ever feel erased, remember, silence is just the space before sound. IMC. She folded the page, sealed it inside a weatherproof envelope, and tucked it under a loose plank on the porch. Maybe someday a stranger would find it. Maybe no one would. Either way, the words were out there now, like her story, beyond her control, beyond erasure. She stepped outside. The sky over the water glowed with distant lightning, a storm moving farther out to sea. Wind tugged at her jacket. She whispered to the night, "We made noise." 2 months later, the Senate hearings opened. Maddox testified first, his voice steady despite the cameras. Corporal Marin Cole risked her life twice, once in war, once in truth. Both times she did it to save lives. The committee chair asked, "Do you know her whereabouts?" He smiled faintly. "No, and that's exactly how it should be." Somewhere far from the capital, in a small coastal town where the gulls circled over quiet docks, Marin blended into the crowd buying coffee from a corner cafe. Her hair was shorter now, dyed dark. A cap shadowed her eyes. No one recognized her, and that anonymity felt like the truest reward. She sipped the coffee, watched the morning unfold, fishermen loading nets, children chasing pigeons, ordinary life continuing as if history hadn't trembled a week ago. For the first time in years, she wasn't running, she wasn't hiding, she was simply present. The radio inside the cafe played a news brief. In today's hearings, officials confirmed that several surviving members of Operation Glasslight have been reinstated with full honors. She closed her eyes. Micah would be among them, maybe Anna too, names restored, ghosts returned to daylight. She smiled small, real. When she left the cafe, the sea mist brushed her face, and the world felt lighter by a fraction. She walked toward the harbor, boots clicking on wet boards, the sound blending with gull cries and distant ship horns. Her voice, low enough only the wind could hear. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it just survives. And for the first time since Kandahar, survival finally felt like enough. Morning came soft the way peace always does, quiet, almost unnoticed. No alarms, no coded messages, no wind screaming through cracked radios. Just the sound of the sea against the rocks and the kettle beginning to hum. Marin poured hot water into a chipped mug, steam clouding the small kitchen window. Beyond it, the ocean stretched like a page half-turned. The storms had eased. Sunlight broke through the clouds in thin gold bands, painting the wet sand. She stood there a moment, watching gulls cut slow circles above the tide. For the first time in years, her hands didn't shake. The radio murmured from the counter, low-frequency weather reports, fishing schedules, static between stations. Somewhere in that static, she could still hear the ghosts of commands, coordinates, her own voice answering copy that to people long gone. But the sound no longer hurt. It had become a reminder that she'd lived through something immense and somehow was still here to listen. She took the mug and stepped outside. The air was cool, salted. The horizon looked endless again instead of hostile. A fisherman waved from a nearby dock. She waved back. He didn't know her, didn't need to. That anonymity was her truest uniform now. Every few days, she walked the coastal path that wound along the cliffs. The wind there could strip thoughts bare. Sometimes she met hikers, tourists, people with maps and cameras. They smiled politely, unaware that the quiet woman with the gray jacket and sea-tangled hair had once carried the weight of governments on a flash drive. She liked it that way. In town, the cafe owner had started keeping her usual order ready by the time she reached the counter. Black coffee, no sugar. Rough weather coming, he'd say, or seas giving us a calm week. Small talk that built a fragile kind of belonging. She paid in cash and left a tip a little too generous for a drifter, but no one asked questions. One morning, the cafe's TV showed footage from the Capitol again. Committee hearings concluding, medals reinstated, families standing with photographs. A woman read out names. Some Marin remembered, some she didn't. When the anchor said, "All charges against Judge Henry Maddox have been dropped," she let out a long, slow breath. He'd weathered the storm with dignity intact. The world was learning his language now, calm truth without spectacle. Micah's face appeared next, being interviewed outside a memorial. "We served," he said simply. "We came back, that should have been enough." She turned off the screen. The words were enough. Afternoons she spent repairing things. A leaky faucet, a broken hinge, the old radio. Work that asked for patience but not memory. She found peace in the rhythm of small fixes, the kind that stayed fixed when you were done. At dusk she sat on the porch steps, writing in a small notebook. Not reports, not logs, just fragments of thoughts she didn't want to lose. Truth doesn't always free you. Sometimes it just removes the walls so you can finally see where you are. People think silence is emptiness. It's not. It's space waiting for meaning. When I die, I hope the sea tells no one my name. Let it belong to the next tide. The words came slower each day, fewer pages needed. Healing wasn't a sudden sunrise. It was the slow recognition that you'd already survived the night. Weeks passed. Spring folded into early summer. The news cycles shifted, other scandals, other crises. The world kept spinning, mercifully indifferent. Marin's story slid from headlines into archives, then into the soft oblivion of old search results. Once she caught a teenager scrolling through his phone on a bench near the pier. Her photo flashed briefly on his screen. A meme now captioned "The ghost who spoke." He laughed with a friend, swiped past it. The image was already myth. She didn't mind. Myths lasted longer than facts sometimes, and this one no longer needed her to stand guard. That night she dreamed of Kandahar again, the heat, the dust, the convoy caught in flame. But the dream ended differently this time. The fire dimmed and the sand turned back into surf. The voices faded into waves. She woke without panic, just a quiet ache that felt almost like gratitude. On a Sunday morning, a letter arrived without a return address. The handwriting was careful, legal. Inside, one sentence: "You once saved my life. This time you saved my faith in it. HM." She smiled. Maddox had found a way to say goodbye without saying it aloud. She folded the note, slipped it between the pages of her notebook. Some debts didn't need repaying, they just needed to be remembered. That afternoon, she walked to the edge of the pier where the sea was rougher. The wind caught her hair, lifting it across her face. She looked out toward the horizon and thought about the people who'd walked beside her through fear: Anna, Micah, Maddox. Each one carried part of the story forward, even if none of them ever spoke of it again. Maybe that was how truth survived, not as noise but as endurance. When tourists asked locals about the quiet woman living near the cliffs, they said she was a writer or maybe a retired teacher. No one knew for sure. She never corrected them. Identities were just costumes. Peace didn't need one. On her last evening before the season changed, she built a small fire on the beach. The flames were low, steady. She fed them pieces of paper, old field notes, code fragments, the last of the forged IDs. They curled and blackened, turning into embers that lifted into the wind and disappeared. From her pocket, she took the flash drive, the original, scarred from use. The world had copied its contents 1,000 times over, but this was the one that had carried the truth first. She held it a moment between her fingers, feeling the faint edges of the metal warm against her skin. "Thank you," she whispered, not to the object but to the version of herself who'd had the courage to use it. Then she threw it into the surf. The tide caught it, pulled it under, and the waves closed again as if nothing had happened. She stayed there until the sky deepened into indigo. The stars appeared one by one, patient, unbothered by the noise of human stories. She thought of the soldiers whose names had returned to light, of the families who could finally grieve out loud. That was enough legacy. The wind grew colder. She wrapped her jacket tighter and turned toward the path home. The sand muffled her footsteps. Behind her, the ocean kept breathing, steady, endless, forgiving. At the porch, she paused. Fireflies flickered in the tall grass, brief sparks of life that seemed to echo everything she'd learned. Beauty didn't have to last, it only had to exist. She whispered a final thought to the night. Peace isn't the absence of war. It's the moment you stop fighting yourself. Inside, the radio clicked on by itself, a timer she'd forgotten to unset. A voice read the late-night news in gentle tones. Today, the Senate confirmed the Veterans Transparency Act with bipartisan support. She smiled faintly, turned the dial down until it was only a hum, and let the sound merge with the wind. She didn't need to hear the words anymore. The world had them now. She sat at the small desk by the window and wrote her last entry. Once I thought survival meant keeping quiet. Now I know it means speaking once clearly, and then letting the echo live its own life. The sea remembers everything it swallows. Maybe that's enough. MC. She closed the notebook, placed it beside the cooling mug of tea, and looked out at the horizon one last time before sleep. The line between sea and sky was barely visible, only color, only motion. It reminded her of the thin space between duty and redemption, noise and silence. Her eyes softened, a slow smile touched her lips. Tomorrow would be ordinary, and that finally was the miracle. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, then fades back into the quiet, trusting the truth to stand on its own.